Hi, this is Dr. Fox, and let's talk about the eye. In this video, we'll discuss the basic layers and supporting apparatus of the eye and its various components. The eye, the globe of the eyeball are all perfect synonyms for the same structure. The eye has three basic layers, from superficial to deep, a fibrous layer, a vascular layer, and a nervous layer. So the most superficial layer, or tunic, is the fibrous layer. And the fibrous layer has responsibilities for maintaining structure as well as refraction of light. And refraction of light is along the anterior aspect of that layer. The vascular layer, or the uvea, is responsible for the transmission of light as well as some refraction of light. It's also in the posterior eye responsible for the conduction of vasculature through the eye. The deepest layer, or the nervous layer, is best known as the retina. The retina consists of special sensory receptors for light. Now, all of these layers together surround the inner part of the eye, which we'll discuss last. So let's start with the fibrous layer, which has two major constituents, the sclera and the cornea. The sclera, colloquially, is known as the white of the eye, and it surrounds all parts of the eye with the exception of the anterior part, which is the cornea. The sclera is important because it's an insertion site for extraocular muscles, as well as some of the intrinsic eye muscles, which we'll discuss as part of the uvea. The cornea is the anterior eye, and while it is completely avascular, it is very sensitive to touch. So any foreign bodies are going to be felt, and that sensation is going to be conducted back to the brain. The cornea is the major refractive index of the eye. So as light enters the eye, it is refracted first by the cornea. Light then is going to travel through the anterior aspects of the uvea, or the intermediate or vascular layer of the eye. The uvea has many parts. The anterior portion is best known as the iris. The iris here is what is referenced with respect to eye color, and it is a special diaphragm that can be adjusted in accordance to conditions to control the size of the pupil, which is the aperture of the diaphragm through which light is transmitted back into the eye. The iris contains intrinsic eye muscles, things like the dilator and sphincter pupillae, which can respond in accordance with the ambient lighting or the emotional state of an individual. Looking at the lateral aspect of a section of the eye, we can also see an important part of the uvea known as the ciliary body, and that structure is there. The ciliary body anchors the lens. The lens is another refractive portion of the pathway of light, which focuses the light on the retina. Now, the ciliary body, because it anchors the lens, contains muscles known as ciliary muscles, which can shape the lens or are responsible for the process of accommodation. This ciliary body also is what secretes aqueous humor. Aqueous humor can move through the posterior segment through the pupil into the anterior segment of the lens. It also can secrete some vitreous humor into the posterior chamber. Now, the vascular layer also continues posteriorly through the eye as the intermediate layer, as the choroid. That choroid is where the vasculature moves. It's also very pigmented, and it's also exceedingly thin. Now, within the iris are two of the three intrinsic muscles of that vascular layer, the sphincter pupillae and the dilator pupillae. The third set of intrinsic muscles are the ciliary muscles, which work in accommodation. Now, the sphincter pupillae muscles are located most medially here, and when they constrict, they contract the pupil. This is a process which is parasympathetically activated. The preganglionic parasympathetic fibers are coming from the oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve 3, and this happens in response to bright light. The dilator pupillae muscles are located outside of the sphincter pupillae muscle, and just as the name suggests, when activated, they dilate the pupil. This occurs in low light situations or when there is sympathetic activation. Well, the sympathetic activation occurs in low light, but if there is sympathetic arousal, then the pupil will dilate by being pulled in all directions. These fibers are coming from the superior cervical ganglion of the sympathetic trunk or chain. Now, the deepest layer or tunic of the eye is the retina. The retina consists of special sensory cells which are responsible for detecting light. So these fibers are going to exit the retina as the optic nerve and are transmitted through the optic canal back to the optic chiasm. Bundled within the optic nerve, within all of those axons, is the central retina artery, which is a branch of the ophthalmic artery. Now the inner part of the eye. There are two segments. There is an anterior segment and a posterior segment. The division between the anterior and posterior segments is that of the lens. So let's start with the anterior segment. The anterior segment is supported by aqueous humor, which has a flow from the ciliary body out through the posterior chamber, through the pupil to the anterior chamber, and then within the anterior chamber there are little canals, the canals of Schlemm, for returning the aqueous humor. So this is washing through both the posterior and anterior chambers, moving nutrients and waste products and providing overall support and some refraction as light moves through. The anterior segment itself is primarily responsible for optics, so that's refraction and focusing of light, as well as the maintenance of internal pressure. Now, beyond the lens, as we move posteriorly, we have the posterior segment. That posterior segment is supported by the vitreous humor. The vitreous humor is a gel-like substance which holds the retina firm against the choroid layer. The retina is what is responsible for converting light into nerve signals. And so that posterior segment is helping to best support this process. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video.